You may want these. This is a chart of the Stainer Aerodrome and the Collingwood Regional Airport separately. Do you want to hand them? There's enough for one each, one set each, and the wind turbines are marked on them. Plus, we have one map coming, should come, that has both airports on the same, because they're very close to each other. But I'm not quite sure where that one went. Oh, you gotta move in tight, too. Like, uncomfortably tight. Uncomfortably tight?
Nope, I'm not getting any closer.
Thank you for being here this afternoon. I want to, my private member's resolution, which will be presented in the House this afternoon, calls on the government to put an immediate and permanent stop to the WPD wind turbine project near the Collingwood Regional Airport and the Stainer Aerodrome. The people of my riding don't want the WPD turbines. They don't want them because they threaten pilot safety. They don't want them because they threaten public safety. They also don't want them because of what they mean to human health. We've all read reports about people living near wind turbines, stories about how residents are plagued by dizziness, a ringing in the ears, and flicker. My constituents don't want to deal with these issues in the years to come. Another reason for my constituents why they don't want the turbines is they will hinder economic development and job creation. Now all of these reasons are pretty straightforward. I understand them. Most people I talk to understand them. They are positions the community has put forward since the project first became public knowledge back in 2010. Sadly, at each step it seems these views haven't been heard, or maybe a better way of putting it is they haven't been valued, because it seems we have a government that is so set on allowing these turbines to happen that it doesn't care one iota about what the people of Simcoe Grey think. And let's for a moment take a look at the sheer height of these turbines. WPD wants to erect 8 500-foot turbines, that's 152 meters, next to the Collingwood Airport and near the Stainer Aerodrome. 2 of the turbines will be 2.1 nautical miles, or that's about 2.5 kilometers, 2.5 miles, I'm sorry, from the Collingwood Airport, and as tall as a 50-story office building. There is nothing like them anywhere in Ontario. It's ludicrous. Simply put, it's the strangest plan I've ever heard in my more than 25 years as an MPP. Planes landing and taking off at the airport will be just seconds away from colliding with these structures. We all remember that on April 27, 2014, a Piper aircraft was destroyed when it collided with the blade of a wind turbine near the Highmore Municipal Airport in South Dakota. 4 men died in that crash. These tragedies can happen. Now I want to introduce to my left, although that would be a strange position for Kevin, but to my left, Kevin Elwood. He's a pilot and the owner of the Stainer Clearview Aerodrome in my riding. He's also on Clearview Township Council. Kevin is extremely knowledgeable about wind turbines. He lives next door to where the WPD turbines will go. Kevin has invested literally 5 years of his life into ensuring that this project does not kill pilots and passengers using either his aerodrome or the Collingwood Regional Airport. As a pilot with 29 years experience, Kevin has flown into the Collingwood Regional Airport, of course, on many times, which is just north of his aerodrome. And so he's very familiar with that facility as well. Kevin's also one of the parties appealing the approval of this project at the Environmental Tribunal. Kevin?
Welcome. Thanks, Jim. So I've made the trek down here today, and I'm in an effort to prevent a fatal aircraft wind turbine accident here in Canada. The federal government, Transport Canada, has adopted worldwide ICAO safety standards for the safe operation of airports and aerodromes. These standards are to ensure pilots and passengers' safety through the safe locating of tall structures and obstacles within the operational airspace used by landing and departing aircraft. Ontario's Green Energy Act does not provide setbacks when siting 500-foot wind turbines in close proximity to airports and aerodromes. This gap in legislation between the province of Ontario and the federal government's jurisdiction over aeronautics is a serious hazard to aviation. The WPD Fairview Wind Turbine Project, proposed by WPD and approved by the province of Ontario, allows for the erection of 8 500-foot wind turbines between Collingwood Regional Airport and my aerodrome, Clearview Aerodrome. All 8 of these wind turbines penetrate the arrival and departure airspace as defined by Transport Canada's guidelines. I brought some mapping, and some of it's provided in front. That's my Clearview Aerodrome, and there's also Collingwood Regional Airport. This mapping depicts the arrival and departure routes for aircraft, and it also has the locations of the proposed approved wind turbines. You can see the tracks for the aerial direction of flight, and you can see the close proximity, if not right through the locations of the aerodromes or the wind turbines. Keep in mind that an aircraft doesn't always fly directly on that single line, so there's more of a flight pattern, and the turbines lie well within the operational airspace of both aerodromes. The turbines are jammed between the 2 aerodromes. They will be a serious safety hazard to both aerodromes. The province has ignored the information, and they've also ignored third-party consulting reports that were provided during the approval process that clearly outlined the risk and the high potential hazard of a turbine aircraft collision. I also want to mention that the Township of Clearview, Town of Collingwood, Simcoe County have appealed the province's approval of these turbines based on the safety hazards that I've just spoken about. Ontario's Green Energy Act does not address the gap in legislation between the province of Ontario and the federal government. The province was made well aware when drafting the Green Energy Act by the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association that they should address this gap in legislation. Does this province want to have the first and also the members of this legislature that will be voting today on this resolution want to be the first government with blood on its hands after they caused the first aircraft turbine crash in Canada? The province is knowingly approving turbines that are a hazard. What is Premier Wynne going to say to the people of this province and Canadians when the inevitable happens? What will she say when she has to stand up in the legislature and explain why a plane collided with a wind turbine? These 8 wind turbine locations are killers. There is no doubt in my mind.
Thank you, thank you, Kevin. Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Charles Magwood. Chuck has enjoyed an extremely successful business career. He was CEO of the Stadium Corporation, which planned and built Skydome. Chuck is now a resident and farmer in Clearview Township, where the turbines will be located. He has a winery on his property, which is known as Four Wheel Farm. Chuck lives nearby where the turbines will be situated. He's been closely involved in this fight. He's part of the Preserve Clearview movement, a local group that has worked very hard to stop WPD, and he's going to talk about the fight residents have made to stop this project, and he offers some real sights into the grassroots approach that the township residents have taken. Chuck?
Yep, thanks, Jim. Preserve Clearview is a group of residents who care a lot about our township, about what's around us. And why we care is that we are fortunate enough to live in one of the most beautiful environments probably in the world. On the west side of where this turbine development is proposed is the Niagara Escarpment, UNESCO approved world biosphere, one of 12 in Canada. What we look out on from the hills in Creemore as we look north is the waters of Georgian Bay, the town of Collingwood. On the right, Wasaga Beach, the world's longest freshwater beach in the world. This is a special area and it deserves special attention. If one was skiing down the hills of Blue Mountain, where they claim they have 750 feet, and we all know it's 700, you'd be looking out at the top of 500-foot high wind turbines. Right now, the grain terminal is the biggest thing on the horizon. These will dwarf it 3 times over. The scale of these turbines in our world will be immense, and they will be seen from the beaches, from the water, from Blue Mountain, and from the hills coming from Creemore. Tourism is a major, major draw in this area. Unbeknownst to the Ministry of Tourism, who I visited with about a year ago, from their own information, this is the most important, the Georgian Triangle is the most important tourist engine in the province of Ontario. It makes up over 7% of the dollars. The Georgian Triangle attracts over 12 million daily visits. This was in 2011, so it's over 14 million today. To put that in perspective, that exceeds Niagara area by 25% and is more than double Muskoka's and the Kawarthas combined. The number of visits of people to chalets and cottages in visits makes up about 4 million of that, and many of those come from the city of Toronto. So the interesting thing about the politics of this is that the urban side of this cannot ignore, because they are skiers, they are boaters, and they come up, what the impact of these turbines is going to be to the area that they love and cherish. And they will be very surprised if at the gateway, the entrance into this tourist area that they come for, they're going to have to find themselves moving through a gateway of turbines, industrial turbines. So the brand of what this area is for tourism will be tarnished. Absolutely, no question. On top of that, now, if we just focus the lens a little further, we have 2 airports, the Collingwood Regional Airport and the Stainer Aerodrome. These 2 are in proximity to each other, and the location of these turbines is right between them. As Kevin has pointed out, there is a gap in jurisdiction here, and that the ball has been punted from the Ministry of the Environment that claim that they've got clearances from NAV Canada and Transport Canada, which they do not. Transport Canada does not have jurisdiction over approvals and locations of wind turbines. All they can do is comment on procedures, and they have advised us in meetings directly face-to-face that the alternative is left with them is that if safety is an issue, they will close down the airport. That is their recourse. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable to the operators of the airport, and certainly if you think of the Airport Commission, which is jointly operated by Wasaga and by Collingwood and by Clearview, those 3 jurisdictions will all be impacted in a huge way. Interestingly enough, the day before the mandamus hearing was to be heard in the Supreme Court, the Ministry of the Environment elected to approve the REA application so that the economic impact study that was prepared by Collingwood was never heard. It was never brought forth, because that study said in no uncertain terms that the impact of these turbines on the Collingwood Airport, therefore on the economy of this whole area, would be devastating. In advance of the Green Energy Act, there were various submissions made. I'm going to read one sentence, which is from the president of COPA, that's Canadian Owners and Pilots. And this was back in 2009. And it was a warning that went to this province as to what should be provided for within the Green Energy Act in order to accommodate aerodromes, airport safety issues. It said, "We believe that a provision should be made in the proposed Green Energy Act to require that an aeronautical evaluation be undertaken by a wind turbine proponent. in all cases to ensure that all aviation facilities are identified and the potential risks and impacts on aviation facilities are analyzed so that potential adverse effects from the development can be mitigated. That was never done. And this is where the gap comes. No one is taking responsibility. I'm going to read for you next February 2013. This is from the Standing Committee for Transport Infrastructure in Communities. It's in Ottawa. Larry Miller, MP chair. That was a session where it was specifically looking at this gap as to who is going to take care of safety for uncertified registered aerodromes. Because a certified aerodrome has protection of zoning within the Aeronautics Act. Uncertified airports do not, which is Clearview and Collingwood. So who is going to take responsibility for safety, knowing that MOE has kicked it up to transport? Transport's kicked it back down again, and I'm going to read you two things here. One is the conclusion of this committee as to whose fault is it and whose responsibility it is. Transport Canada officials told the committee that they are only involved in the location of wind turbines in the case of certified aerodromes. The committee believes that there is a gap in the regulation of the location of wind turbines between provincial and federal governments. The recommendation 22, that came out of that committee was, in order to prevent new wind turbines from affecting NAV Canada operations, the Minister of Transport should review the regulations concerning the location of wind turbines in the vicinity of all aerodromes, including unregistered facilities. Nothing's happened. I don't believe anyone's taken this up. So, what's the decision? The decision is that the REA is approved, and they publish their reasons. They skirt around this, and I'm going to get back for 1 second to how the minister answered these questions this morning, if you don't mind. But I read you this, that the ball got punted, as I mentioned, up and back and over, and this is where it ends up. Pilots are responsible. That's the decision, and I'm reading here from the REA decision. It is a requirement of pilots. So, the wind is blowing, the snow is coming off the bay, and we have here over 95% of all flights going into the Collingwood Airport and 100% of the flights into Clearview that are operating on a visual basis without instrumentation. But it is a requirement of pilots planning to take off or land at the CRA and Stainer to make themselves aware of the aerodrome conditions, including obstacles in the vicinity of the aerodrome. Pilots are responsible to conduct a safe flight. So that's where it comes back to. When it's all said and done, it's up to the pilots. This morning, the minister, in response to the question from Mr. Wilson, said that his first answer was they made the decision because of a concern about a lawsuit. Interesting that you're more worried about the implications and exposure of a lawsuit from an offshore company than you are about the safety of the people that live within your own province. That was the first answer. The second answer that came is that this isn't our matter, it's an aeronautic matter. It belongs with Transport Canada. What came out this morning is that is not true either. Mr. Wilson pointed that out. The response to that was, he said, it's really up to the director, we're not experts. Okay, if he's not an expert and he's the minister, who the hell is? Number two is the director. In our case, we've had 3 directors that I can count that have looked at our file through the piece. The last director that made this decision has been on the job for 2 months. This is an immense file. And he came from, as a matter of interest, I believe, from Waste Management, which probably suits him quite well for this particular task. The other answer was that the ERT will take care of it. Well, that is an offensive answer to where we stand right now. Preserve Clearview has spent over $1 million fighting this fight. At the preliminary hearing last week, before the ERT starts on May the 16th, the room was full of lawyers. There are 6 appeals to the ERT, as Kevin has mentioned. And 3 of them are from the municipalities directly impacted. We've got Simcoe County, we've got the Township of Clearview, and we've got the Town of Collingwood. Everybody. At that hearing, there was 6 sets of lawyers. I hate and shudder to think what the cost of all of that is. And the onus, according to the way that the tribunal regulations are worded, are on us, the appellants. It's incredible that there's a criminal onus like beyond reasonable doubt, we have to prove serious and aggrieved harm. We have to, as appellants to this decision, prove that we are right. And this tribunal is set up, according to its own regulations, to reflect the policy of the government. What are our chances of succeeding in that kind of environment? And furthermore, the basis for the appeal is limited only to human harm and animal life. And it's a narrow focus. We are going to fight that fight to the bitter end. But the odds are stacked hugely against us in it. So for him to say that our recourse and where we can go to protect the pilots and to protect safety within our community is to go to the ERT, is to say, number one, I have no respect whatsoever for what it may cost all of you. I don't care whether everyone that's involved within this area is opposed to it. And furthermore, I don't really care that the basis upon which you can appeal it is a narrow one, which you're doomed to fail because of the way the regulations are set up. So in conclusion, I just say this, that the obligation falls back to this government right now. We can't look anywhere else. They set this Green Energy Act in place. They're the authors of the holes that have been created, and they're the only ones that can cure it. So the private member's bill this afternoon from Mr. Wilson is really one of our only chances, and I'd say don't react for political reasons. Do the right thing. Protect our community.
Thank you, Chuck. Questions?
Kevin, I have a question for you. I'm wondering if you can talk about the real risks for pilots. Looking at this map, I think some people would say, well, maybe you could avoid it. Tell us about maybe how the risks sort of present themselves.
Okay, so both aerodromes lie within close proximity to the Georgian Bay, and Georgian Bay is like a microclimate in itself, that we get a lot of weather conditions that are associated with the close proximity to Georgian Bay. So we get snow showers, rain, fog. So we do get lots of, more often than most aerodromes in southern Ontario, of low visibility. So the low visibility, these are white wind turbines. Visibility, reduced visibility is usually in conditions of a similar color, white, clouds, snow, rain. And like I did say before, is that aircraft don't always fly it's not like a lane on a road. You got a center line and a shoulder. There is not a flight that's completed without pilot errors. Small errors, and that's why safety regulations are written in such a way to allow for a certain amount of pilot error. When we put these wind turbines in close to these aerodromes, we're now close to the ground. We are trying to focus on landing on a runway, and the turbine lies between you and the runway. It's very difficult to maneuver around that. You're at slow flight, you're configured to land, and your opportunity to maneuver around the obstacle is restricted. And also, wind turbines will produce wake turbulence, and it's 10 times the width of the rotor diameter downwind, and that turbulence is invisible to a pilot.
Kevin, go ahead. Kevin, and maybe Mr. Wilson, because this morning the minister responded that, I guess he's spoken, or the ministry has spoken several times with NAV Canada and Transport Canada, and neither one has seen a safety issue in this. Maybe you could respond to that.
So Transport Canada and NAV Canada each were approached by the proponent to evaluate the turbine locations. They don't evaluate them from all aerodrome operations. They strictly look at the requirements they can make through their regulations. So Transport Canada only looks at marking the obstacle. They don't look at how the obstacle will be a safety risk to operations. So they make requirements to put a light on the top of it or paint the obstacle so it's visible to a pilot. And if the obstacle is erected and it is a safety risk, they'll respond by restricting operations at the aerodrome or go so far as to close that aerodrome. And NAV Canada only regulates approved IFR instrument flight reference procedures. So they do not look at VFR procedures. And Chuck Magwood just mentioned that most movements at both aerodromes, probably about 80 to 90% of the movements, are under VFR flight rules. So the pilot's flying visual. So NAV Canada only assessed the impact to their approved, published IFR procedures.
And I was told, and you've heard me say this in the House, I was told about a year and a half ago by a senior official in NAV Canada that one of the reasons they don't have any real rules around this for these aerodromes is they didn't think any government would be stupid enough to put 500-foot wind turbines near airports. And every other province except Ontario has planning authority, so the local municipalities would simply say you can't put them there. Of course, the Green Energy Act stripped local planning authority from our municipalities. So part of the reason I think the committee was dealing with in Ottawa was they have this phenomena in Ontario where basically there are no rules because they stripped the body that would enforce planning, enforce rules of any authority. So we have this big gap all around. And, for the minister to dodge today by hiding behind the director, as I said in my answer, I have no doubt the director's following the law. But you made the law. You created this gap. You were warned by the Pilots Association. You've been warned by citizens back from 2010, even before you created the Green Energy Act, that you have to watch out for these obstacles. You shouldn't put them near airports. So it's, and whatever happened to ministerial responsibility around here, that minister is responsible for all decisions of his department. And so far, he's getting away with skirting those responsibilities, as is the Premier of this province. Sorry, Keith, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I'm just looking at, covered some of it. I was just going to ask you about anyway. Specifically about this gap. Where can you go now? The government's made it pretty clear. I mean, I know your motion's up for debate this afternoon. The government's pretty clear they're not backing down on this. They're going to go through. So where can we go here? If there's this gap in legislation, where can the local community groups and you go together either the feds or the province to somehow close the gap and give you a future, or else, because if it's erected, if I understand this correctly, once it's up, it's the aerodrome that then gets threatened with closure as opposed to the wind turbine getting taken away. Where do we go from here?
Do you want to comment on that, John? I mean, well, yeah. I mean, politically, you're right, Keith. We've tried everything. And unfortunately, the decision actually said they have to have these things built within 3 years. So we may not be the government, in government, soon enough to cancel these things. And the airport authority, the board, right from the beginning has been very sensible. They're not against wind turbines. They're not really against the rest of the Green Energy Act. They've tried to make that clear. Their initial and continued request is move the darn things. So they didn't want to get into this debate about green energy and all that. But now it's come to the point where the government has said no to that. So we're just saying, cancel the darn things. Do whatever you have to do. Surely human life is above politics. And there's more than enough evidence, I think, particularly if you look at the South Dakota crash, that it's not a matter of if there's going to be a death. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. Do you want to comment any further? Have you run out of money?
Yeah, my grandkids have. Yeah, right now, if Jim could succeed with this private members bill, it would certainly be the right decision. It would be a way out. The chance of success we'll see this afternoon. There's the appeal at the ERT, and the issue there will be safety. And we're bringing in, and the other appellants are bringing in the best experts that we can find from all over the world. We're going for it because human health is the focus, and safety is human health. So hopefully that board can see the sanity of this and feel that they are compelled to protect the safety of the community with respect to that hearing. But who knows where that can end up, because the record of successful appeals is very, very thin. Mind you, I don't know whether there's been an appeal that's been as focused as this one on this particular issue, with the weight of experts that are going to be part of that. But if we fail with that, then the only other thing left is, short of sabotage, is judicial review. And judicial review is, once again, would be focused on a bunch of other issues that deal with this file, independent of the safety issue.
We'll be editing this portion of the.
I don't care.
I just wonder, Chuck, because you talked about, I guess, the aesthetics of these things, and I know there have been a couple of cases with regard to property values, and the courts have already ruled and determined that there is no effect.
No, that is not actually what happened, with respect. That
was the Wiggins, though.
Yeah, no. But that decision said something a little different than that. What that decision said was that until such time as the turbines are erected, that the court could not make a decision with respect to the impact on property values. In other words, that decision was deemed to be premature. It did not discourage an application on property values after the decision. The trouble is, after the decision and after they're built, it's a little late.
Just one out of left field for you, Mr. Wilson. Do you know if the developer of that wood project is a donator to the Liberal Till?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago in the legislature, I did the follow the money question, and each time each time the project hit a snag, the first donation was $6,000, then the next time it hit a snag, it was $3,000, then it was $2,000, then it was $1,000, and those are just the ones that have been recorded to date. No money to the other parties. And the first $6,000 donation, as you know, when you get these things from federal elections finance people, and I want to thank Ian Adams here of the Sun Group up in our riding of actually taking the time to go through these things. So he did the story first, and we followed on that with the what's been filed with the court, and it showed that in one case, the WPD, the Liberals had in their, how do I put this? They had in their hands, the director was questioning some of the evidence that had put in, and the WPD then sends them a check. The director then says, "Oh, I'm okay," and then the check is deposited the next day. Because on these statements, they show you when the check is sent and when the check is actually deposited. Very strange, you know. And it may not be. I have a theory about this, which is always dangerous at a media conference, but you know, we have very professional bureaucrats in this province, and it may not be the bureaucrat doing anything, but there may be somebody in the minister's offices monitoring where these contracts are going. And you would know as a minister, I was a former minister of the environment, if there's a snag somewhere along the line, your director's asking for information, just like when an FOI comes in, there's a note set up to the minister. If there's a question about a contract, the note's sent up to the minister. Somebody's, I think, using that information in projects like this, and of course we have this suspicion across the government, that the Liberal fundraising arm seems to move in tandem or just after or before decisions of this government. So it may not be illegal, but they are taking basically inside information, I think, and doing these things. But I can't prove it with WPD, and I don't want to get sued because Chuck's already spent any money that we have. It's just highly, highly suspicious. So if you look in Hansard, you'll see the follow the money question. Do you have any final words on anything? We're good?
This is a little off-piste, too. You went off-piste, we'll go off-piste. That there was an approval, for example, for this contract to be transferred from WPD Canada to WPD Fairview. And that's a single-purpose company, effectively a shell company with no assets. And so it means that if there's any liability here, I mean, we're talking about safety, and who are you going to sue, and who's going to stand up and be responsible? Who is WPD Fairview, Inc.? Well, it is a file in a lawyer's office. I'm pretty sure that's what you'll find. And interestingly, too, is that when this contract is over, there's decommissioning covenants that are going to be fulfilled by a shell company. That's better than bankruptcy. It's worthless. That's the way the structure is, and that's the way they've been permitted to set this thing up. It didn't start that way, but there had to be an agreement to consent to an assignment to a shell company worth nothing at some point along the way.
And I'll add to that that occurred, that change of ownership to the shell company seemed to correspond when I sent a notice of liability to the proponent, to OPA, and to the optioned landowners, and put them on liability notice for an aviation accident at my aerodrome, that the project was then switched into a shell company.
Okay, thank you.